Welcome to this week's webinar on the new user interface of SDS2 2021. We're going through a quick introductory tour. My name is Aditya Krishnan. I am the product owner for SDS2's multi-year user experience modernization initiative.
I'm Stephanie Hay, the Director of Product Development.
And I'm Michelle McCarthy, VP of Revenue Operations.
So before we get started, I just want to congratulate both the internal team at SDS2 as well as our users for having migrated to the new user interface. And something that I wanted to share with everyone was a typical review that we have received from some of our customers. We've received a lot of them, and they all seem to have a common theme to them. The first thing that I want to talk about is how people recognize that there has been a change in the way they have done things in the past with what we've put out there this year. And we will be going through all of those changes in a couple of webinars. And beyond that, they all seem to say that their first impressions have been relatively positive, which is great news for us. It means that we're on the right track with this. Beyond that, they also recognize that there are areas that we need to keep working on it, and we understand that too. And the whole theme behind the next year's implementation and development is going to be getting your user feedback and throwing it into SDS2. This, as I've mentioned before, the user experience is a multi-year modernization initiative, and it's going to take all of us to get to where we want to go with the software. So just to cover the agenda for this particular webinar, we will give you a brief overview of why we chose to go through this initiative this year, why we started making all of these changes, why we decided to modernize in SDS2 2021. After that, we will start looking at the new home screen, and we will cover exactly how you would navigate it, see how it is similar to the older interface, but how we've added some nice new features to it. And at the end of it, we will open it up for discussion where we would love to hear from you, and any kind of feedback that you have would be welcome in this forum. So with that, let's talk about why we made this change. First of all, let's recognize the fact that this UX update has been in planning for several years. We've been listening to feedback from customers, from users group conferences. I think they're now called SDS2 summits. And we've also taken your feedback from support calls and sales calls as well. We've taken all of that feedback and we have consolidated, and turned them into actionable items that our developers can work on. And we finally have a plan to modernize over the next few years. One of the biggest things to come out of that feedback was the fact that there is a steep learning curve associated with SDS2, whether it is for new or existing users. So just to give you some stats, our support staff have reported that they spend 10 to 15% of their time just helping users find tools and features and commands within SDS2. Now that's a significant amount of time where they could be spending on optimizing workflows or other support related issues. The next thing that probably is worth showing is our old interface, just to give you an idea of what we are trying to get away from. So you all will recognize this screen over here. This is the 2020i job and fabricator settings screen. We have always had trouble with new and existing users when we try to show them the location of an option. This wall of buttons is something that is prevalent in a large part of our user interface, at least as of 2020. And just to throw some trivia at you, there is a user experience term called cognitive load, and it basically says that the number of items that you present a user is directly proportional to how much time they spend wasting as they try to achieve a quantum of productivity. So There is a UX law that actually says that the average person can keep at most 7 items, plus or minus 2, in their working memory at a given time. Now, when you're presented with a wall of buttons of this sort, it throws that into stark relief. How am I supposed to find that one setting that helps me, let's say, change something related to bolts? From the screen, I'm not able to get to that without having known where that exists at least once. The first time that you're faced with this user interface, it's going to take you several minutes or several times to find the right spot for all of these features. And that eats into your productivity time. And that's really the focus of what we're trying to achieve with the new release, is to improve the findability of existing and new tools, commands, features, options, what have you. That's really what we try to focus on with this change. And it has come up not just from our own studies. In 2015, for example, Microsoft published a report which said that the world now has an average attention span of 8 seconds. So just imagine if you had something like this in front of you, how long are you going to look before you start losing interest in finding what you want?
8
Especially
seconds?
8 seconds is the average.
Wow.
I mean, that's less than a goldfish's attention span. It's just crazy.
Right. I mean, my teenager, I'd be impressed if she had 8 seconds.
It's just getting worse every year. It's kind of
Right.
crazy with all of this, and yeah, it's quite ridiculous because we are, with our phones and everything, we now have this obsessive compulsive disorder where we have to check our phone every few minutes, and that is feeding into the way, I'm going to say kids these days. I'm young myself, but I'm going to say kids these days are on that kind of platform where it's always about instant gratification, and they don't have those attention spans that the rest of us have had for years. So just a bit of trivia, just to explain why we had to go do this thing over here. Michelle, you want to talk about the brand identity?
Yes, I would love to. So one of the things that we really wanted to tackle too with the new UI UX was the updating of SDS2's brand. And as you've seen on the website, you've seen in our ads, you can see on the new home screen that we've got right here, SDS2 has a new logo. And we really timed all of that to take place at the same time so that as a brand, we could have an identity that is new and modern and forward-looking, not only in our marketing, but also across the software and into the user base. And so this project really just helped us tie that all together and make something cohesive that we can deliver to the market.
We've had a lot of positive feedback on just that branding alone. It's been amazing.
Right. And it's all about visibility on things like search results and stuff as well. We made such huge gains on that platform. When you search for detailing and steel, we are one of the first items that pop up in a Google search. This is all about visibility in a market that is getting more and more crowded every year. We need to take steps that will keep us visible in such a market.
Right. And even, when we launched the new brand in January, the time spent on the website went up. So it's enjoyable to look at. People want to spend their time longer looking at what we have to offer. So having something that's a little bit more visually appealing does make a difference.
Right. So now that we've told you about why we started this process, let's dig a little bit into what our constraints were with the UX update. So the first thing that comes to mind when you look at SDS2 2020 is that it is dated. That's been the standard excuse that a lot of people have used to stay away from us. Michelle will attest to the fact that it was actually hurting our sales at one point.
I would agree with that too.
Right. So in this particular case, that we decided to take that problem head on. And from a developer's perspective, which I am, one of the problems that we have always faced is implementing features in our decades-old UI technology that come pre-packaged in a lot of the ones that are available today in the market. We are lucky that we've had a talented group of developers who could hack apart our old technology and create things like the SDS2 model tree, as an example. It is I mean, you know what a tree is when you look at it. So here is the SDS2 2020 screen, and you see these user elements like a model tree, right? You know what a model tree is. You know what a table is in the form of the base and cap plate schedule. So all of these screens that we have in SDS2, you would imagine that it's easy to implement in any modern UI technology. Well, ours is decades old, and it actually took a really talented group of people to kind of hack things apart and get us to having something that we would take for granted today. My personal feeling on this is, why should our developers spend so much time in actually implementing these basic widget functionalities when we would rather use them to develop actual productivity features that most of us would rather have than, okay, we made a table this year. That seems like an undersell. That seems like something that should just work. And that was one of the main reasons why we started looking at newer technologies. And also, from SDS2's perspective, finding developers who can actually work with this older technology was getting more and more difficult. And so we decided, let's change it up. Let's start thinking about how to get away from that corner that we always seem to be painting ourselves into. Then beyond that, we also have to understand that SDS2 has hundreds, maybe even thousands of screens. It is a real puzzle for us to make incremental releases into the market with the new UI technology also in it. So it was necessary for us to come up with a strategy that would allow us to make small changes, small but extremely visible changes that would attract crowds to the product, while at the same time maintaining your existing workflows and not hampering your production time. That was extremely important to us. Some examples of what we came out this year: beyond the user experience update, we've also brought you Toolbox plugins, which are these amazing plugins that have been developed by people in-house that enhance your productivity in myriads of ways. So I'll just show you a quick guide. This is the NSDS2 webpage. You can actually go to the webpage and get them all. It's pretty impressive. But a lot of these things are with our own partners, and some of them have been built by people at SDS2 as well. And they're all aimed at helping you with your production. And this is the first year that we're doing this, is that right?
Yes, that's right. We just added the SDS2 toolbox in the summer of 2020.
Yes.
So it's been around about 6-7 months.
And while we talk about user experience, we will eventually get to the point where we'll show you how we have incorporated the website into the software itself so that there's a seamless transition between the product and your overall engagement with SDS2 as a company.
And something I want to mention too with that toolbox is, along with working with partners, we have our ones that we've developed as well, but we're continually adding content to that to help improve that. And that's, you know, on almost a monthly basis, where you're seeing new tools and new components, new members to improve that productivity and efficiency for you guys to add that into your structures, into your projects.
Without a new release too. That's what's really important. Yes. Is that we're able to get you new features through the toolbox without you waiting for a 2021 I release to get some of these new productivity enhancers.
Yes, good point.
So I think that's basically what I wanted to show. I just wanted to give you an idea of what our constraints were and what we were trying to achieve with this release. And we will talk a little bit more about that later. For now, I hand it over to Michelle.
Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen here is SDS2 detailing from 2020i and 2021. These are the main menu for 2020i and the home area for SDS2 2021 and going forward. As Aditya mentioned before, the average person can keep about 7 things in mind and remember where they're at any one time. So if you look at the right-hand side at 2020, you can see there's just a lot there to sift through and filter through to figure out what do you need to do. Most of our users have gotten used to this with muscle memory, but for new users and those just getting onto SDS2 and that learning curve that comes into this, trying to find everything that don't have that muscle memory, it becomes very difficult to find the things that you need here. So kind of what I want to draw out is that on the left-hand side, you still have everything you had on the main menu. It's just presented a little bit cleaner. Some of the terminology is updated to make a little bit more sense. A new user might not have known what design link or model link did, where import and export makes a lot of sense to anybody using the software. So even if you're an existing user that's been using SDS2 for a while, thinking I need to look for design link, okay, what do I want to do? I want to import. It's probably pretty easy to move over to that line of thought and find the things that you need, not to mention some of the other tools that we'll be talking about here shortly. Same thing goes for the modeling area. In SDS2 2021 versus 2020i, you can see that just the icon presentation is quite a bit different. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot that kind of assaults the eye over here on the right-hand side with the SDS2 2020. There's so many different colored icons. There's so many icons on here that don't make a whole lot of sense maybe to the user that's newer to SDS2. Where in 2021, there's a little bit less presented. It's organized by how you're going to build your project, where you're going to lay out, add members, add material, get to your drawings, work with tools and display options and everything like that. But then you also have some of these areas here that we'll talk about a little bit that also make things more findable for you in SDS2.
That right-hand side definitely gave me that cognitive overload
yes.
that Aditya was referring to.
Right. And when you're used to looking at it every day, it doesn't seem like it would do that, you know, if I'm used to seeing that every day. But then when you see it in comparison to 2021, it does look drastically different and is a little bit less to absorb when you're working with it. Oh, go ahead, Aditya.
Yeah, so another thing to observe over here is we have Autodesk's products, the Revit and I think that's AutoCAD. So you can see the big difference between the way SDS2 2020 looks when you compare it against the two Autodesk products and Microsoft. When you shift your workflows between these, and I know that our existing users, they probably go through a bunch of these different softwares throughout the day, right? And when you suddenly switch over to SDS2 2020, they have to readjust and recognize that the UI elements are no longer the same as what they're used to with the rest of it. And that hurts productivity. In fact, I think there was another study by Amazon. A second's delay in a user's interaction with Amazon.com costs them $1.6 billion.
Oh, wow.
If you, I guess that's times the number of users, but a second is that much. So we need to make sure that you are not getting interrupted during your production workflow. And that's part of the focus.
Right, and especially if we take a comparison here now, I'm going to jump to the 2021 version of SDS2 in comparison to these products. You can see it's a lot less jarring of a difference. It is more conforming with those products that everyone else is using day to day. And we have to remember that that's where the next pool of users is coming from for new detailers that are coming into the industry is going to be someone that's used to maybe some of these other products. So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to just show you a little bit between SDS2 and Word about how we took some of this really seriously when we were developing this. So if I just open up Word here, I can see I've got the SDS2 logo on here. When I click on the image, you can see, okay, I'm working with an image. What do you want to do with that image? And so it brings up the tools that I want to work with. And so we took this inspiration to SDS2. I'm going to move this grid line. Just by selecting the grid line, it brings up the contextual toolbar that allows me to have the tools at hand that I would need to work with this grid line. So I'm going to move this grid, say 2 foot, where you can see that will update right away for me. So that's a lot faster process than it was to go back through and go through the pull down and select it, then find the grid line move, then go through all the process. It's a lot faster process now.
And that's assuming that you know where it's at in the pull downs.
Correct.
Right. Otherwise, you would have had to select the grid, go look through the menu bars and find that
Right.
location that talks about moving, and then move the thing. And this assumes that your toolbar, your menu configuration is also up to date. Is that something that we ship, or is that something that's built in?
That was
menus?
shipped.
Yeah, the pull downs were shipped. You just had to memorize where everything was, which could be difficult too.
Right.
Correct.
And the toolbars can be configured, right?
Correct.
No, not just the
Yes.
toolbars. What about the menu system itself?
No, the
No.
pull downs could not.
Okay, I was just confirming.
No. And we'll get deeper into the editing of ribbons in that second half of our webinar here. So I'm going to jump us here to our next points that we want to go through. So there's a lot here to cover. This is the UX honeycomb edition. If you want to talk a little bit about that and what that means to us.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit. Again, we're getting back into some deep UX stuff over here, but I think it's important that you understand where we are coming from. Michelle, if you don't mind, I'll let you handle the controls for this particular part. All right. So let's talk a bit about where we get this UX honeycomb from. There's this guy called Peter Morville, and he has been working in the field of user experience for more than a couple of decades at this point. And he developed this honeycomb as a way for a company to achieve balance between the various facets of user experience development in order to achieve a valuable product from the perspective of both the business as well as its users. So that's really what we're trying to achieve with this project. As we keep working through the enhancements, the end goal is to provide our customers an increased value for their investment in SDS2. I mean, I know the software is expensive by consumer standards, absolutely. But we need to make sure that when we work to add value, we are giving you tools that will streamline the processes that you use during your production. And we need to reduce the amount of time it takes for you to get from a model to your end deliverables for your details and your fabrication and so on. And that also applies to brand new connections. And maybe it is about training an employee, or maybe it's about producing shop drawings. Whatever you need to do, we need to make sure that your production time is shortened. And of course, we will get into some examples of this, but let's talk about the individual facets, and I'll elaborate a little bit more about it. So let's talk a little bit about usefulness. A software is considered useful when you are able to use it in an effective manner to go from interactions with the software and achieve a reasonable deliverable that is, again, useful to the people around you. In this case, that would be your shop drawings, your reports, your transmittals, what have you. As a detailing product, we had to make sure that this update of SDS2 maintained the usefulness that has already been achieved in a very effective product with SDS2 2020. And we had to make sure that the deliverables are still producible without too much of a learning curve and adapting to the new home screen and the new modeling interface. We have actively been working with a number of customers who have acted as stakeholders on the entirety of the 2020 year's development cycle, meaning the deliverable for 2021 general. And if you talk to them, you will find out that we've done a decent job of it. Let's move on to the next one, which is desirability. So here's a hard fact when it comes to user experience. Studies have shown that people perceive attractive things as being more usable. It may not be true. It might just be fancy packaging. I mean, you go play Candy Crush, it looks pretty amazing, but all you're doing is swiping left or right and achieving a few things, but it's not particularly useful, I guess, at least from a detailer's perspective, unless you want to kill a lot of time. I'm sure that people would agree with me on that one. But the entire slick interface that they came up with for Candy Crush is all about keeping the user addicted to the game. It's a bad thing, but that was its
Sorry.
And I'm sorry, but that is a fact.
It is.
It is attractive. It is slick. It looks nice. And at the end of the day, that's what you really want. You want to feel good about the software you use, and not have to think of it as dated. You should not think, oh, how clunky this piece of software is. Software should be replaced with something else, but I'm not going to say it here. But
Well, I think Michelle had an awesome example for clunky.
Oh yeah, so let's put this in terms of cars, right? So how many of you detailers out there are driving a Ford Pinto? Wouldn't you rather be in a Ferrari or something that goes fast, or maybe a Ford King Ranch? Or if you're David Zapka, then a Chevy. But the point is,
Oh.
SDS2 can, and it now does look much better while still getting the job done for you effectively.
right.
I'm kind of there with
Aesthetic-
David, Chevy.
Chevys can be nice. I mean,
No.
no? Okay. Anyway, aesthetics actually go beyond just simple window dressing. It's not just about making it a new slick interface with a whole bunch of buttons that pop up and lights and things like that. It's more about reducing clutter. It's about making colors purposeful. We will talk again about this in accessibility, but when it comes to our icons, for example, we've done this thing where all of our icons have been redesigned. We had some pretty good
There's
ones.
right there in the bottom left is the icon cheat sheet.
Yeah, here, I can bring up the icon cheat sheet.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. So here's something that we have done. With our icons, we have taken the effort to be purposeful about the usage of color and reduce the overall visual clutter that was associated with the old icons. This is part of the aesthetic facet. You don't need excessive color to represent the same message. And beyond that, this icon sheet, by the way, is going to be available to our users. It's public. It's part of our effort towards reducing the learning curve. I think if you go into support resources, download SDS2 and icon cheat sheet. So for each software version, you will have some new icons over here, and I think it's also searchable. It also talks about which interfaces it applies to. So as you can see, just look at those examples right there for the drawing editor.
Oh,
I don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, see, that's an example of bad user interface, by the way. So if you want something that's specific to the modeling window or specific to the drawing editor, you can come in here and you can search for it, and there you have it. You have icons that are relevant to what you're searching for. So that's about the icons, but beyond that, our overall aesthetic has a goal of achieving a similar or comparable visual standard to what other softwares in the market do. So if you are a new user coming fresh out of college, you're probably familiar with Autodesk products and Microsoft products and stuff like that. And then it goes back to that comparison that Michelle did a while ago. It's not so much as breaking that visual standard that you're used to. We should be avoiding that the best we can, and making sure that when you switch to SDS2, it looks like the rest of the products you make use of. It needs to provide you with visual cues that help you with your production. So when, like for example, she was showing the contextual tabs. When you clicked on the grid member, a new tab appeared and it highlighted it and it showed you that these are the things that you can make use of in this event. So all of this plays into aesthetics and helps with the visuals. The visual cues are part of aesthetics and they help with productivity. It is impossible to ignore when you are working on a user experience, an overall user experience. The next thing that I'd like to briefly touch upon is accessibility. And this is, it might not really be an issue for most of you, but the fact is that some of our users are colorblind, and the existing icons that we've always had have had visual clutter that takes away from the meaning of what that icon is supposed to indicate. Just as an example that we had in the previous screen was dimension add. You had a whole structure multicolored with dimensions on the top and God knows what else. You don't need that much to convey in a black and white setting what that icon is supposed to do. And that's what we tried to do. Our colors are purposeful for people who can see it, but the icons will work just as well if you make them black and white. And I think that was a huge achievement at this time.
All right, so let's talk about credibility next. And when it comes to software development, just consider the first time you meet a person, the first impression they give, if they're dressed neatly and put together with composure and confidence and are knowledgeable about their subject matter, your impression of them changes. It tends to be higher than when you maybe would meet with someone who's disheveled and messy and sloppy. Even if that person knows way more about whatever that topic may be, you're instantly giving more credibility to the person who's put together. It's just a reflex. So hands down, SDS2 wins when it comes to subject matter for steel detailing and fabrication. It's a better, more knowledgeable product. It's deeper. It does more for you as a detailer or a fabricator. But there were people there that can't get past that first impression of a dated interface. And it just adds one more challenge that our sales team has to overcome when convincing a company to invest in SDS2 and to build their own fabrication or detailing around SDS2. So even while that's been a sales problem for SDS2 at times, the more people looked at SDS2, the more they would want the productivity that it gives and the deeper functionality that it had, but you had to spend more time with them to get them to see that and convince them that, no, you need to overlook, well, the slick, shiny interfaces of the other softwares out there. But this really isn't just about software sales. Like, consider just the design calculations reports that come from SDS2. Part of this project is going to be enhancing the image of the reports and shop drawings that you deliver to your customers. So with that, there's been significant upgrades to the long form calculations, and more upgrades I think will come. But also look at PDF linking for shop drawings. That just provides a higher level of credibility for your output in SDS2 and the way your customers will see your deliverable. The next thing, let's talk about findability in SDS2. And this is one of the best things about 2021. There's a ton of examples of how we've incorporated findability into the interface. But the low-hanging fruit to talk about here is the search functionality. We've put it everywhere we can. It's in the home screen. It's in the setup options. What?
In modeling.
Oh, in modeling, yeah. So when you're in lightning mode in modeling, you've got the searchability in the modeling area, which makes it way easier to learn.
Don't give too much away. People are going to not watch the next webinar then.
Right, I'll keep showing it over and over. I love this feature. So with that, it helps you find tools and things that maybe you never even knew was in the software for years, just by being able to search for, things that are associated with beams. You might be able to find components to add to beams and that kind of stuff. Or when I would do demos, I would always, every single time I would want to show, hey, where do you change the linear footage for your handrail to show in the bill of material that you can combine it all? And I swear, every time I opened SDS2, it just moved to another setup screen. I could never find it. Now I can search it. It'll be there in seconds. So between the searchability and the findability with the toolbars, not to mention ribbons and roles, these two are really big things to help manage the most useful tools always being at your hand, depending on the role that you're playing in the project. So with that said, I'm going to move on to usability. When we talk about that, how many of you remember first learning the software? Did you, Steph? Do you remember how long it took for you to pick it up?
Yeah, it took a while.
Given that I'm a developer, I have a cheat sheet under the hood. So half the time when people refer to things, sometimes it's referred to the same old things under the hood, but then when you change it out on us, I'm not able to find it in the old interface.
Right.
That's one of the huge things. It kind of plays back into findability a little bit, but yes, I would say it took me a good few years to get my knowledge to the point where I can find those things. Absolutely.
Right. Well, the problem was too is that things kept moving too. So the findability plays into that.
Right. And for our customers, we would generally say, it's going to take a couple projects for you to learn the software. So for those of you who are able to pick it up and be productive immediately, was it 3 or 6 months? Like, think about that. It's going to be way less of a learning curve to learn SDS2 with this lightning mode interface.
I think
even when you're just transitioning.
Right. I actually think that there was one of our UX stakeholders externally who said that they managed to get through it within a week.
That was two of them. Two of them specifically said that.
Right. And these are users who've been with SDS2 for decades. So they've been used to all of our interface changes. And for them to pick it up that quickly was pretty impressive.
Right. And so the more work that we put into the SDS2 user interface, the more we're going to be able to shorten those learning curves, the more we'll be able to make you productive in SDS2 and help you get to a deliverable faster. The 2021 UI UX update is the first of the many steps that we're taking in that direction. So what might feel like a step back to you right now when you start using the new interface, these are just the building blocks that are going to allow us to take leaps forward in the future. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steph.
All right, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and get into navigating the home screen. To start off with, we've got our current and changed job, and I'm going to do a live demo of this here in a minute, but I'm just going to kind of run through a few areas first. So we've got the current change job in the top left-hand corner, similar to where it was placed before on the old main menu. We've got change fabricator or current fabricator, allowing you to change right there. Before you actually had to open up setup and change the fabricator there. You can do that directly now from the home screen. You have your sidebar, which has your analytics, project settings, reports, import, export, utilities. Some of those have been touched on a little bit, and I'll dive in a little bit deeper here in a minute. Then you've got your modeling and your drawing editor down there in the bottom left-hand corner. Those are icons. Before you had icons on the main screen as well. We've just moved them over to the left-hand side. You've got your recent and pinned projects. Important updates here. We've got this SDS2 toolbox, and I'm going to explain how that's a dynamic image with updates here in just a little bit. And then we've got a resource area. So let's go ahead and I'm going to open up my SDS2 here. Okay, we're going to dive in. So right off the bat, we've got this change job or create new job. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. This is the same screen that you're used to with selecting a job or creating a new one. Before, on the fabricator, you used to have to actually open up setup like I mentioned, but now you can actually click right here and go ahead and create a new fabricator. For those of you that do have multiple fabricators for your settings on a single project, you can switch easily between the fabricators with this one click here. This little icon on the top left-hand corner, I'm going to mention also, it's a pin option. So I'm going to come down here to this middle section. You have your recent projects and you have pin projects. For those of you that have, like, maybe you're jumping between 10 jobs, but 3 you're actively working on. So you want to be able to pin those so you can quickly get to that list. Every time you open up SDS2, you can just jump to this list. So if I want to pin this and pin maybe the pipe rack project, I go to my list right here and it's going to show up in pin projects. Okay, if I want to unpin something, I can just go over here to the right and remove it from that pinned list. Okay, and I can quickly jump to these projects by just selecting this. It's a button right here, and it's going to open that project right up. Same with this recent projects list. I can quickly jump to these jobs. I can also remove items from my recent project list. So if I have too many items on this list, or I don't want to see this job in this list anymore, I can just hit the X on the right-hand side. Notice it does tell me the repository in the last time I opened it. So that's really nice to be able to quickly jump between there.
Should also mention that recent projects is limited to 5, but pinned is unlimited. So
that's a really good point, Aditya. Thank you for bringing that up. We are limited to the 5 in the recent, but you could pin unlimited amounts of jobs if you wanted to. So next I'm going to go into is analytics. And once I open up that, I have my analytics similar to what you used to see on the main menu, which you had that chart that you would refresh. There is a refresh option down here at the bottom. Okay, it'll tell you the last time that it was generated. You also have a save functionality, and that save functionality is going to then spit out a PDF here report. Here's an example of me just saving that PDF off. Isn't that nice? And it's all nice. Good. I love the branding and everything at the bottom.
I just want to say that's the future. That's where we're headed with all of our reports. Spoiling.
Yes. And at the top, you have some options to like filter. You could do it by member, sequence, zone. You have some additional chart settings, whether it's the fabricator. It's very similar to what you saw in the main menu before. It's the same kind of settings here with model checked. This is a combination of member statuses and custom properties. Again, the same thing that you had on that main menu. I think Michelle had mentioned that you're not losing any functionality. It's just presented much cleaner, easier to understand. You have the ability to do it by member counts or tons, and you can even go so far as using estimates. So you could do that and say, for example, you have 200 tons of this project is done, but you know that it's going to be 1,000 tons. and you want to come in here, and I'm going to change this to tons. I have 1,000 in here. It's going to change your y-axis on this chart, kind of giving you an updated information on this project. Again, at any time you wanted to refresh this, you could hit the refresh button if you have multiple people working on this project and you wanted to have up-to-date data.
Yeah, that estimate thing is a new feature this year, and the real intent behind it is really, in any production, you're never going to know what the total tonnage is going to be at the end of your production cycle. So this is a way to make sure that your reports are consistent throughout the production cycle. So maybe, and as you get better at your estimates, you can change that number or get rid of it entirely and just use actual tonnage, and then you get total completion, and that really helps with your tracking and stuff like that.
Nice. Next, I'm going to go into project settings, and we have done some reorganization and some update on terminology here as well. To start with, at the top, I think Michelle and Adisha both mentioned findability and search options that we've added all over. I'm going to start by, I started, I think Bolt was referenced, for example. Adisha referenced, okay, well, how many times or how many places you're going to have to look for all the Bolt options. I've typed in Bolt, and you can quickly see all the different places where you have Bolt settings. If I wanted to look for wide gauge, okay, I can quickly get into my wide gauge OSL and, you know, all bolted connections here. Go ahead and get back out of there. Maybe I think, what was that thing that you said, which was linear? Okay, I can type that in there. I think, Michelle, you referenced the handrail stuff. I can quickly find that.
And yeah, all of these search results, if you would just type something back in there, let's just go with Bolt or something. So what you're seeing over here really is the title that's in blue, and those black search hits are really fields that are within the screens themselves. So if you happen to know the field name in the past, this is how you would find them. Even if they might have shifted, it's now up to date, and it will go to the right screen that has them in them. So I think that's a pretty sweet feature. And also, Steph did mention that we had terminology changes and stuff like that. So as you start typing in terminology that you're familiar with from, say, 2020, it used to be called drawing pens or something, and now we may have renamed it to line weights, but you will still get a hit on that same screen. And if you open it up, it's more than likely going to be exactly the same screen that you're familiar with, but the terminology has changed so that it is more in line with industry standards. That's really what this is about.
Right, and that's a great point. And for any of those existing users, if you remember those old names like drawing cosmetics, drawing pen setup, you can kind of see that as I type that in, it's going to bring in that new window name. And so you don't lose trying to find that, and you can quickly open up what you're used to. Something else that I wanted to bring up was going into standard fabricator connections, and you can quickly see up here, I have a breadcrumb telling me that I'm in a fabricator setting. Continuing to go further, I am in the preferred connection material setup. You just see how you have those breadcrumbs. So if I wanted to go back one step, I could quickly.
And those of you who have multiple mouse buttons on your gaming mice or whatever, you can actually use the back button on your mouse itself to go back and forth, just like a web page and stuff.
Best feature ever, because I have that on my mouse. I love that.
Right.
Something else we have on this home screen area on the sidebar is reports. Across the top, you've got some bigger buttons for items that we kind of want to point out, and then you have your recent pinned and system reports. So you've got your ABM, you've got a couple drop down right here with expanded and the short calc, your generate report and create report templates, just like that report writer that you're used to. You've got your recent reports, any of those that you've ran. You have the pinned functionality, just like you have with projects. I have one of those pinned right here. And something I want to point out is this little icon right here. That is a system report versus a custom report. That's what that icon means there, is all your system reports are just kind of showing you ones that are included, embedded in the software versus report writer reports. You can pin them, you can remove them from the pinned options, just like you could with the project. You got your system. Again, we have our awesome search functionality. So if I want to type in material, summary, you can quickly find that report you're looking for. Okay. And I can run that right then.
That's better than a pull down.
I have never found a single report from that old list that was there on the main menu. Just
Yeah.
never.
I love the search.
Yeah.
Import and export. Something else was brought up with the terminology design link and model link. I think Michelle mentioned that. That was very difficult to try and explain to users what that meant. You now have import model, you have export model under the export section. So we're kind of grouping these together so you can quickly go to those areas and find that. Project transfer, for example, is going to be both on import and export because that screen has both functionality. Same with status transfer. You can see under here on the export, you've got your export model, your 2D, your 3D, trying to group that together so it's more intuitive, quickly, easy, easy for you to find. Your MRP options here. You don't have to go and open up setup. You have your setup directly right here. That way you can just open those options up that are tied to those different exports. Next is utilities. Again, continuing with the theme of some terminology updates, shape properties. People seem to understand that, and it's kind of consistent across the industry of, those are your shapes. That's the material file editor for those people that are existing users. User and site options. I'm going to go ahead and open that up because I wanted to show a couple things in there. We did do some reorganization, again, to try and help find things more quickly here, but there's a couple new key features I wanted to point out, and we're going to go more in depth, I think, on the next session here. But here, right here, is you have your classic and lightning. Both Michelle and Aditya have mentioned the lightning. Your classic is the existing classic style that you're used to in previous versions. We do understand that while we're moving into the new user interface, that you want to still be productive and efficient. And while we believe and we know that lightning is going to make you more productive, we understand that it's going to take a little time to get used to it. So we do give you that option to have classic as well. Something else I want to point out is under the modeling font.
Spoiler.
I know you're going to steal my thunder later.
I'm sorry. These are awesome changes, and I tell you that UX team, you guys have done an awesome job with all this stuff. That's just a couple things in user and site options there. Across the top, update attributes. Those are, again, terminology changes here. But something I want to mention is, obviously, we have our search functionality here, is convert. Okay, so for those of you users who are trying to convert those classic keyboards and shortcut menus forward, you can still use those. Okay, so while we have classic, which is your toolbars that you're used to, you can bring your keyboards and your shortcuts and pair those with the new ribbons, which is pretty awesome because a lot of those people that are used, muscle memory with your keyboard, you got one hand on the keyboard and one hand on the mouse, you can quickly remember those quick keys that you're used to. So I typed in the word convert, and I'm going to go ahead and do convert classic. I'm going to just go ahead and pick modeling. And I have a user toolbar in here, which was a classic style toolbar that I want to pull those quick keys and that shortcut menu, which is your right click menu. I'm going to pick that, and it's going to tell me that, hey, I have configurations right here that's going to extract. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. It's telling me again 2 configurations have been extracted. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of point out where those are. Those were my classic toolbars here. I had that user toolbar, and in my data directory, I have keyboard configurations. I now have a new keyboard configuration and a new shortcut that says user toolbar, so it uses that same name. This is going to allow me to pair that with an updated ribbon.
Right. We'll talk about roles and ribbons and stuff in the next one, but yeah.
I did want to can I just show them real quick just how they can select it?
Sure. Okay.
So if I come in here and just to show you an example is keyboard configurations and shortcuts, this allows me to pick up that user toolbar and I can assign it to that ribbon. And like Aditya said, we're going to get more in depth on how to create those ribbons at that next session.
Right.
Some other things on the home screen, you've got your modeling, your drawing editor. I'm going to go back to this home tab. The nice part about having all of this stuff over here is you saw, no matter what I did over on the right-hand side, these items stayed here. So at any time I can go into modeling. It's not hidden under a tab. It's not lost anywhere. But I'm going to go back to this home section. And this section right here, which is, like I said, is a dynamic image. For those of you connected to the internet, if I hit the learn more, it's going to then open up, and let me go ahead and bring this over here. It's going to open up my link here to the SDS2 2021 series. That content in that image will change. and we'll give updated information. Obviously, it's talking about the March 8th to 11th, which is our webinar series right now. Over here, and if I just want to also say, if you're not connected to the internet, don't be worried. It will be a static image. It will be just fine. But over here on the right-hand side, you've got a resource center. This is huge because not everyone realizes that we have how-to videos, where there's free webinars, there's training information, newsletter. I mean, the marketing team and support team and everybody has really come together and added so much more content to the website. This is giving you links so that you can directly go to those pages and see all that awesome content and information to help you learn how to use the new software.
Right. This is just more towards that unified, cohesive experience that an end user would have with SDS2 itself. I think it's fantastic that you've managed to get sales and marketing and development all on the same page with this thing.
It's been awesome. Well, that's all that I have. I'm going to go back to here.
Before you wrap up, I just wanted to mention one last thing. On that home screen, actually, if you are part of the HAS Plus license program, you actually get a notification right above that model and drawing editor buttons, right where Steph is hovering right now. At that spot, you will see license information telling you that your license is about to expire and so on and so forth, especially for those of you who prefer the HAS Plus and offline workflow. It will remind you that you need to connect to the web once in a while so that your license is updated, and it gives it to you right there. And so there's no longer a need to look at your license manager to go figure out if your license is up to date or not. So I just thought that was a neat little feature that, again, it's hidden because you don't need to see that all the time. Another way of us reducing the visual clutter that you see on the screen.
Thanks, Aditya. I've noticed that on mine recently. Yeah, so let's take a look at the support resources, Steph. So it looks like you have to be logged in. Once you're logged into the SDS2 support site, we've got a page that has everything that we think you're going to need to learn a little bit more about SDS2 2021. So if you click on that download SDS2 2021, that'll take you to the page where you can find your release notes, install instructions, hardware requirements, the icon cheat sheet that we showed you before, some interface and navigation videos. Click on that for a second.
That's huge. That's new too.
And
It's
so there's, go ahead.
It covers everything that we've basically been talking about during this seminar and the next one. So it's pretty sweet.
Yep. So yeah, you can take a minute or two at a time to take a look at all these different videos and how everything operates with the new user interface. Going back to the previous level of the website here, then you also have your how-to articles for all the new features that we have added, and you'll see a few of these throughout the week with different features that have been added to SDS2 2021.
These are really nice. I mean, even just like we talked about with the UX being upgraded, the look of these have been, I mean, they're nice.
Then you've also got your interface and navigation videos that we saw before, but then the getting started videos have also been updated, I believe. Or if they aren't, they will be. Nope, they're updated. So you've got your getting started videos here for people that are new to SDS2. If you didn't know these were available, you do have very simple videos to get people started that aren't the full-length training videos. And the training programs, you might click on that training programs quick too. So this is if you've got new detailers or you want them to go through the online basic training, that's free and available on the website. We also have estimator training for ESTA modeling workflows, and hope to be adding additional advanced training here in the future. I think that probably wraps it up, don't you think?
I think so too.
So I guess we'll open it up for questions.
That sounds good.
Okay, I've got a couple questions here for you guys, so I'll read them off for you, Steph and Aditya. There's a couple you answered already, but I think it's good for the wider group to hear. Will the user configurations toolbar config and keyboard shortcuts transfer over seamlessly, or will they need to be set up from scratch?
Right, so I can take that one. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We have a utility that will allow you to convert those those toolbar configuration files into what is needed for the new Lightning mode interface. We will be talking a little bit more in depth about it in the next webinar. But yes, I think it was demoed also during this particular one that there's a utility function called convert user config or something to that effect. Let me just get the exact name for you. Yeah, convert classic keyboard and shortcut. That's what it's called. It's located in your utilities, and you can use that to convert your old toolbar configurations into what is needed for the new Lightning mode for the modeling window. So yeah, you don't need to set it up from scratch. And we actually are going to offer something that will let you mix and match them, and it's all going to be some exciting features that you would be able to see at the next webinar.
Okay. Next one I'm going to take here is there any way to link the analytics to some user custom properties?
I believe there are some custom properties that were already built in into 2020 itself. I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but the intent for this particular release was to just take that existing functionality and bring it forward in a new package so that people start talking to us about features they would like to see in the new UI. So if there were custom properties available to you in 2020, then those are the same ones that are now available to you in 2021.
Okay. When installing 2021, will it feed off our current HASP block, or will it be feeding off the internet lock site?
So I was just getting ready to answer that one as well. And SDS2 2021 is going to be using your existing license files. So whether you're using a HASP or some people are referring to as HASP-less internet licensing, it'll use whatever your existing license file. So just make sure that you have your version updated to be able to run 2021, but it just uses that existing file.
Okay. Because the accessibility is easier now, can settings be locked in some way?
Don't we have some sort of user password system built into SDS2 already?
Yes. Correct. Go ahead.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that if those password functionalities have not been taken away, and yeah, there you have it. I think someone is demoing it right now on screen. So you can set
Correct.
Passwords for project settings on that screen, and then your users, they might be able to see it if I'm not mistaken, but they will not be able to change the settings.
There you go. Let's see. Is the Fabricator file still saved within the job, or is it back to 7.3 in the older style of Fabricator folder and job folder?
The fabricators are still stored inside the job, just like 2020.
Okay.
I can talk about, there's another question about Python.
Yeah.
And I talked about the end of life 2.7. Yeah, we are fully aware of the fact that Python 2.7 went end of life in 2020. The reason why we had to keep, we are actually shipping Python 2.7 with SDS2 for maintaining our existing customers' scripts, which would require a significant amount of changes to bring them up to speed to Python 3. So this is all about making sure that they can transition fully before we, flip the switch on them. Do we also have something about the .NET API in terms of the webinars? Is that also something that's coming up?
I'm
Repeat
not
that
sure.
one, Laura?
Okay, well, I just want to mention that while we are looking into a switch from 2.7 Python to 3, we are also working on a .NET API, which is another way that you can access pretty much the same stuff. If we don't have a webinar already planned, I'm sure that something will come up eventually. So between the two of them, yes, you will be covered. You will be up to date with newer technology as we get to it. I hope that answers your question, Clint.
There are 2 playlists as well on our YouTube for the .NET API. There's step-by-step tutorials.
Nice.
Michelle, so
Yeah.
when the rebranding of SDS2 took place, why not removing the 2 from the name also?
Well, SDS2 has been the product name for a lot longer than it was SDS way back when. And there's also some other companies out in the industry, shop data systems, that go by SDS. So not really an option. But hopefully that answers the question.
Good one, though.
Are we able to import custom report files into SDS2? I'm not really sure what you mean by import custom report files, but it would be the same thing as your report writer had previously, which is the, the create report templates and generate report that runs the report writer. Other than that, I'm not sure what you mean by importing.
Don't transmittals also allow you to attach custom files or something?
You can export and do round tripping with the status. So if you go to the, I don't know who's running the main home screen there. If you go to import, you've got your status transfer type of stuff as well on the import and export. But as far as custom reports, I'm not sure. Other than that is what you're looking for.
See, can you talk about the new Usefulness license? We are still on version 2016. So that the Usefulness license is just the ability to operate SDS2 without a lock or the hasp that goes on your computer. It also allows you to update your license file via the internet instead of a license file, correct, Steph?
Yes, yes. If you're running Usefulness or internet or whatever however you want to refer to, has been referred to lots of different ways. You just don't need that USB dongle, the little hasp anymore, and it just pings the internet to validate your license. Now, if you're running Usefulness, I know there has been some questions and how often if I'm not connected to the internet. Don't worry, because you can run up to 4 weeks without being connected to the internet right now. However, when it gets down to 2 weeks, it'll start telling you in that little message that was referenced in the presentation above the modeling and drawing editor icons. It will tell you that you need to connect to the internet within 2 weeks, just so it can do some validations.
Let's see, and we've got just a few minutes left here before we go to our next webinar. So whatever we don't get answered in this one, we will get answered in the next one here. Let's see.
There's one about searching for a report. How do I know what folder it is with the search tool? So currently under the reports section, the search is searching the system reports. Okay, so system reports are installed and embedded in SDS2. If you're wanting to run a user report, like a custom report, you're just going to go and generate report, like she's got right there, and then you're going to go look for your file structure, just like you had previously.
Yeah, and Windows has built-in search functionality. So if you're looking for a specific file, just make use of that directly. But the important thing is once you run it once, then it shows up in that list over there. So yeah, so who's running this thing right now?
Michelle is, I think, right now.
Okay, so once Michelle finishes running this thing,
it'll show up in your recent.
So if you go back to recent, yeah, now the report's finished, go back into recent and there it's visible to you. So SDS2_user, that's the, it's relative to your data directory. So in your 2021/reports/SDS2_user, that's that location that's visible on screen right now. And it also does not have that system reports icon. So Michelle, would you go ahead and run a systems report as well? So all of this really hasn't changed much. It's as we said, it's a transitional product and everything. So If you're familiar with this old thing, it's still the same thing. Now she's finished running it, and there you have now on the recent tab, you have that system icon followed by field bold summary. And that's the one that can be searched, and that's the one that does not have a path associated with it. And that's the key difference between the row number 1 and row number 2. Row 2 is an example of a user-generated report. If it is located inside your data directory /reports, then you will see the whole path. And you can also keep your files elsewhere. If you choose to keep it on your desktop, for example, you will see the entire path over there. So that's how you would find them.
I think we're kind of at the end of our time box. It's 10:05. Is that right, Laura?
Yes,
I
that's
think
correct.
so, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so well, I want to tell everybody thank you for attending, and hopefully we'll see you in the next session, which starts here really soon. And again, we will either answer your questions if we didn't get to them via email or in the next session.